Hey guys, it's Renee. So I was actually asked by a few people to film my labour and delivery story for my son Ryder. Things are slightly different because I did have a C-section. So I hope this is interesting to anyone who would like to sort of know the story, or I guess know a bit more about having a C-section. Because of the disease that I used to have Perthes disease in my hip, and that led to me getting a hip replacement. I always knew that I would most likely have to have a C-section when I had a baby one day, so it's always something I sort of grew up with, knowing that it's something that I would just have done. And so I was never really quite scared of it until probably like the night before and the morning of is when I started to really get anxious. When I was about 30, I want to say I was like 30, between 34 and 36 weeks, I can't really remember. I think it was like closer to 36 weeks pregnant. I had an appointment with my obstetrician. I did go private, so I did pay out of pocket and things to basically have my own obstetrician. Basically, she discussed when I wanted to have the baby. So she only did C-sections on a Thursday and Friday every week. So the dates would either be a Thursday or a Friday, and I was able to either choose the week of the 17th and the 18th of March, or the following week, which was like the 24th and 25th of March was the following week, I think. The week that I did choose, which I ended up choosing the Friday. I don't know why, I just chose it. That week I was 38 weeks pregnant plus 5 days. So I was 38 plus 5. And if I chose the following week, then I would be 39 plus 5 days. The reason that they did the C-section around the 38th week is for a few different reasons, I guess. The main reasoning is they don't want you to go into labour because they don't want you rushed in for an emergency C-section. I had heard from a lot of people emergency C-sections are a lot harder to recover from. Just the whole concept is just very stressful and very full on and very rushed, and I can only imagine how stressful that would actually be, just really rushing in to get this baby out. And yeah, didn't want that to happen, especially with everything I sort of went through with my hip. I just did not want, you know, this horrible, painful, stressful experience. You know, I wanted it to be a nice experience, or as nice as it could be anyway. Yeah, so I opted for the week before. Some of the other reasons that I did opt for that week as well, instead of waiting an extra week, was towards the end of my pregnancy, I was getting a lot of nerve pains down my hips, both of them, not just my operated side. And I think it was just from where the baby was sitting, and yeah, I was getting these really painful nerve pains down my hips, so I could no longer lay on my back at all. So if I was on the couch and I was kind of slumped back, I'd start getting these pains. If I tried rolling over in bed, that would trigger it. It'd be really, really painful. I started to sort of panic in a way. I was getting really anxious because I was just so scared that something was going to happen with my hip. And you know, if any of you guys have watched my hip replacement videos, that was just so hard and full on. Nevertheless, so I chose the 18th of March. Leading up to it, I packed my hospital bag. I had a bag packed for baby, so I had a separate bag just for him. I think I had a third bag and that was empty, but that was basically things like dirty clothes, if I got any gifts while I was in hospital, toiletries, things like that. So it was kind of like an extras bag as a just in case. So I had the 3 bags. The morning of going into the hospital, we actually took some photos in Ryder's room, which was really cute. I'll try and insert photos throughout this video just so you guys can see. But yeah, so we took some photos. That was really cute. It was sort of funny seeing my belly. So basically how things worked was we turned up to the hospital and went up to the private floor, and we basically waited around at the reception area for our room. I think we actually went into the hospital at like 6 a.m. So I had a morning Caesar versus an afternoon one. So yeah, so we got in there at about 6 or 6:30 in the morning. We got taken into, I guess, the room where I was going to stay. The room was pretty awesome. It actually had a double I think it was a double size bed. So it was a hospital bed, but it was a double version, which was just awesome. So basically hubby could stay there with me the whole time and we could stay in the same bed, which was just absolutely perfect. I did have my own room, which is a bonus of going private. Basically, it was kind of, the way that I've explained this to a few people, it was kind of like checking into a hotel, like accommodation, where we brought our bags in, unpacked things into the bathroom and the clothes cupboard, and, you know, just kind of set things up, I guess, which was, yeah, it was really surreal. But at that point I was definitely feeling really nervous, and when I get nervous I get really quiet and I just don't talk. I just stay super quiet. I kind of like zen in a way. We had a midwife come in and she gave us what we needed to change into for the operating theatre. I basically had a white hospital robe type thing where they do up at the back. Hubby got an outfit. He just had sort of like those blue, I think they were blue coloured scrubs, and he just put them over his clothes, and he got like a little hat and everything. Probably waited, I'd say, about 2 hours. So during this whole process, you know, like we were kind of talking a little bit and then we sort of go quiet, and I had to fast from, I think it was midnight the night before. Yeah, so I couldn't eat or drink or anything, which makes it even worse when you're feeling nervous because you feel a bit sick and everything. But yeah, so we basically waited around. We finally got calls to say that everything was going to go ahead. That was around, I want to say, like 9:15, 9:30 or so. They put me onto another hospital bed, a single bed, and they basically wheeled me down into the operating theatre. They wheeled me in first to the operating theatre and hubby waited outside. It was crazy. Like, there would have been, I want to say, like 15 different people in the room, which I was like, holy moly. Like, it was my obstetrician, the anesthetic dude, whatever his name is, anesthetist, can't say that. The anesthetist dude had an assistant, and then there were all these other people, right? So before I sort of got wheeled in properly, I basically chatted to the anesthetic guy. He basically spoke to me about what he was going to do, you know, about, I think it was a spinal that I got. Wheeled me into the operating theatre. I hopped onto, I guess, the main operating theatre bed. Then they basically sat me up, they did the spinal. That was definitely when I started feeling the most scared, the most anxious. I sort of could feel my body, you know, just really tensing up. Like I was just really, really just anxious, you know. But everyone was just so lovely, my goodness. So one of the people in the room was a gentleman. He basically was standing facing me, and he was holding me as the anesthetic guy was behind me with his assistant. And he basically got me to kind of almost lean forward, and he kind of cuddled me to keep me super still. And he basically spoke to me throughout the whole spinal, explained how I would feel, and he sort of kept telling me to breathe and just relax. And that was such a huge help. Like, that was so nice to have somebody that it just felt like you're being looked after by your dad or something, you know. So that was really nice. Once they did the spinal, there were no problems whatsoever with there. I know sometimes they say when you are a bit overweight, they worry about not being able to find exactly where the spinal needs to go in, and so they talk about other options and you having to go under general, which means you're not awake when they do the Caesar, things like that. But because I've already had like an epidural and a spinal before, I wasn't really that worried. And right in the middle of my back is probably the least amount of fat that I have. But nevertheless, so there were no problems whatsoever. Pretty much as soon as they did the spinal, I lost all feeling from like my hips down my legs. I could not feel them. I couldn't really move them. I could kind of still swivel my body, but they had to basically lift my legs and move them, which was just the creepiest feeling in the world. It just feels so weird. Like, you can feel people touching you, or you know you're being touched, but you can't feel it. It's just a really weird feeling. It doesn't hurt, it doesn't feel yuck, it's just weird. So basically, as soon as the spinal was in, they laid me back down. They put sort of the curtain up in front of you so that you obviously can't see everything they're doing. Then they brought my husband in. So this whole time he was waiting outside. My anesthetic started pumping me with medications of whatever kind to make sure I didn't feel anything. But then all of a sudden my blood pressure dropped really low. I instantly started feeling really not well. So I started feeling really faint. I started seeing colored splotches. I felt like I was going to throw up, and I felt kind of like woozy and nauseous all at once. And I could tell that something, you know, was going on, because he sort of not panicked, but you could just feel that there was a bit of tension in the room, that they were just trying to hurry up and fix whatever was going on. So I think he was putting things into the drip to kind of counteract whatever was going on and to bring my blood pressure up a bit. He did say that the drugs that they put in were definitely working, but they were working a little bit too well, and my body was kind of really reacting to it. I had low blood pressure my whole pregnancy actually, and that wasn't really much of a surprise, but it was a little bit of a scary thing to happen. So yeah, so once that was all stabilized, they put like a wet face washer over my forehead just to kind of make me feel a bit better, because I did feel a little bit sick for a little while, but it felt a bit more relaxing, I guess, to have that over my forehead. So yeah, so in the photos you'll see that I've got like this white face washer on my forehead. To be honest, from then on it was actually really quick. It felt like it was only 15 minutes or so. So during this whole time I must have gone in at 9:15, 9:30, and I had my son at 1:10. So it was really a quick procedure as they were starting, you know. So they told me, yep, we're going to start now. The anesthetic was standing, our anesthetist was standing next to me, and he was kind of looking over the curtain, and he'd look over the curtain and then look back at me and then look back over and then look back at me, and he's like, you can't feel anything, right? And I'm like, nope. And he's like, okay, cool, because if you felt anything right then things would be bad. So in other words, they had obviously started cutting or whatever, which was just kind of a bit creepy. And I'm like, no, I feel great, you know, I feel really good. So I was definitely still with it, but I just felt anxious and nervous and excited and scared, and it was just like this overwhelming sense of emotions, because I'm sort of like tensed up and anxious about the Caesar itself, you know, like getting cut. And then it's like you're also kind of thinking, I hope my baby's okay, like I just want to hear him, I just want to know everything's okay, I just want to, you know what I mean? And then you're excited to see your baby, so you sort of run through all these different emotions. And I remember laying there feeling like I was tensed the whole time, and I remember afterwards I actually had all this pain in my shoulders, and I'm pretty sure it was from laying there like really, you know, like really rigid, like all my muscles must have just been going crazy. When they took the baby out, they lifted him up, they dropped the curtain, so they gave me sort of like a quick look, and they took him straight over to like the little incubator sort of area where they do like all the baby checks and stuff. Then my husband went over. Basically, he actually didn't cut the umbilical cord. That was one thing didn't really know until later, but I was surprised about. Is I don't really know why. I still don't know why, but I think it may have to do with the fact that I had an anterior placenta, which is where the placenta grows at the front of the belly. The placenta can grow anywhere inside, right? Mine grew at the front, which was really annoying, was really frustrating, because one, I really didn't feel much at all. It wasn't until really far along in the pregnancy that I felt baby, and also I never really saw a whole heap of movement. I never really felt movement. I don't think I ever felt hiccups. Basically it sort of like cushioned the baby so that you didn't really feel a whole heap, because I guess they were pushing against the placenta before they'd push against your belly. They did actually have to use forceps to pull the baby out of me, which isn't really, I guess, as common, but because the placenta was kind of really covering where the cut was, there really wasn't much room to get the baby out, so they had to use forceps to basically maneuver him out of me. I think that maybe because of that reason they automatically cut the umbilical cord, because there was just so much going on. So yeah, so that's how that sort of went along. So I was a little bit sad to kind of know that, you know, that hubby didn't get to, you know, cut the umbilical cord, but I figure whatever needed to happen, you know, to get the baby out quick and healthy and easy. So, you know, that was that. One of the things I definitely remember is them saying, okay, we've got baby out, and then it's just that wait. You're just waiting for the baby to make a sound. And I remember just laying there, like my eyes must have been like really wide open, because it was just like, okay, I haven't heard him yet, haven't heard anything, haven't heard anything. And you're just like, is everything okay? Like, is there something wrong, you know? And then as soon as you hear the baby, you just start crying. Like, I want to cry now just thinking about it. It's just such a special moment. You just feel so full of love. You really do. It's like a part of your heart has just come out of you, you know. So emotional. Yeah, that was just such a beautiful moment. Basically, they took baby away. You know, they basically told you it was a boy. They took baby away and did all the checks, and they kind of cleaned him all up and stuck him in a little wrap, and then they came and brought him over to me, and it was just such a beautiful moment. I just wanted to just look at him. I can't explain it any other way than you just want to stare at them. You don't want to do anything but just look at them, and it's just the most precious, beautiful feeling in the entire world, and I never realized I would ever feel like that. Once they had him out, they sort of took him away. I think hubby was actually holding him. Then they had to kind of take the placenta out of me, and that was actually a lot of tugging. So that's when they said, okay, there's going to be a lot of tugging and movement. That was not really a nice thing to go through. So with all the tugging and the pulling, they actually made me sort of push. So they're like, okay, we need you to kind of like, you know, like push to sort of help, I guess, push the placenta out. It was just sort of like a lot of reefing. Like my whole body was like going like this from, you know, obviously them really pulling at me, and I started feeling really sick. So I started feeling incredibly nauseous. The anesthetist had to give me sort of top-ups of nausea medication. They also got like a throw-up bag, and then they did like another face washer for me. I really thought I was going to throw up. I just felt really queasy, and especially by this point, like I hadn't eaten for forever or had any water. So, you know, you're running on an empty stomach, and just with that, it just, yeah, wasn't a nice feeling. So once they did all of that, got it all sorted and all stitched up and everything, they transferred me back into another single bed. I want to say the whole process probably took 45 minutes, maybe 40 to 45 minutes. It was pretty quick. It definitely felt not that long. Like it felt pretty quick. It didn't really feel like forever. So once I was in the other bed, had me all kind of bundled up with blankets and everything, and they gave me Ryder back. Straight away we knew that we were going to call him Ryder. We had that name picked out probably for months beforehand. I think before we even found out we were having a boy. It's actually just a name that we found on one of those Android phone apps, like the baby name apps, and we actually just randomly came across it, and we both looked at each other like, yes, that's his name. And it's quite funny because I've only just discovered since having him that Ryder is the name of a Paw Patrol character, which is really quite hilarious. I basically held Ryder all cuddled up, and we got wheeled into recovery. Now the midwife that was looking after us in our room upstairs in the hospital came down into the theatre. She basically was kind of like going between my husband and me, and holding the baby, and then she actually came with us into recovery as well. So she came with us through the whole circle, and then came back with us into the room afterwards as well. So you had, I guess, the same midwife the whole way through, which was a real big relief. So while we're down in recovery, we were probably down there for, I want to say, like an hour to 2 hours. It was actually a lot longer than expected. So during recovery, they kind of make sure you start getting feeling back in your legs. Did take a little while. I felt incredibly itchy as I was getting my feeling back, which they told me was totally normal. But like from my chest down, I just wanted to scratch. Like it was just so itchy. I felt no pain whatsoever. I really still didn't feel my legs for quite a while after then. So I stayed in the bed the whole time. During recovery, that's when I started breastfeeding. So gave him a feed. He did actually have jaundice. So he was quite tired, and so he just sort of would fall asleep really easily when I was trying to feed him. During recovery, the hospital actually had a blackout, so all the power went out, and then obviously the backup generators came on, but that happened a few times. I think there was actually a big storm happening while this was all going on, but that probably happened 3 or 4 times while we were down there, and basically they didn't want us to put us in the lift to go back upstairs in case the lift stopped and we got stuck in there. So that was definitely an experience. So basically we just chilled out there and waited until sort of like everything was normalized for a while before we went into the lift. We went into the lift, went back upstairs to the private ward, and then got wheeled into the room. And it was kind of surreal because baby was in this like little clear bassinet capsule type bed, and I was still in my singular bed, and I stayed in that bed for the whole night. So I didn't go into the double bed yet. I couldn't get up, so I had I think it's a catheter. I had a catheter in, so I couldn't get up to go to the bathroom or anything. Hubby was able to stay with me in the hospital, so he used the double bed for that night. That night, as time went on, the painkillers did wear off a bit. So I did feel pain, but it was kind of a weird pain to explain. So it was sort of like an ache is the best way I can explain it. It was sort of obviously in the lower tummy area, but it was just a painful ache. And it was more annoying than anything. Like, even if I wanted to sleep, there's no way you could really sleep through it because it was just constantly there. I had a PCA hooked up, which basically gave me doses of morphine, and I'd basically click it whenever I was feeling pain, and it would give me a shot of morphine. And that was really good. It's a very good pain medication to sort of you know, keep the pain in check, to make sure it didn't get too bad. Even still, like, it still ached. That night I basically spent the entire night just looking at him. I remember just laying there, just like looking over the bed and just staring at Ryder. Yeah, and just like watching him breathe, and just feeling so fascinated. I remember writing that on Facebook, and so many people telling me like, oh my God, you need to sleep. And it's just like, I didn't want to sort of go into detail to explain it or anything, but even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have been able to because of that achy pain anyway. The following day, I was definitely determined to have a shower and get out of bed. I know so many people said when you have a C-section, that's the most important thing you can do, along with making sure you stand up straight as quick as possible, or as soon as possible, I probably should say. A lot of people say that you tend to hunch over, and that's definitely true. I don't really know how to explain it other than it doesn't hurt to straighten up whatsoever. It doesn't feel pulling or anything, but I think just because of what's happened to your tummy, you just automatically go to hunch over, I guess, to protect it. I got up the next day. I did have to use a couple of the shots of the PCA to kind of maneuver myself out of bed. My dog is climbing all over the couch while I'm trying to film this. So yeah, so probably half an hour before I was actually going to get up, I think before the midwives actually got in, I started to use the remote to put the bed head up. So slowly putting it up, because even just crunching or leaning forward, it didn't feel good, you know, it was pretty uncomfortable. So I sort of did a few shots of the PCA to make sure I was like really, you know, really medicated, and then I started doing that, and I sat up probably for 15 minutes beforehand, just not doing anything, just to get used to actually being upright, for one, because you do get quite dizzy and faint, and also just to have that pressure on my belly to sort of get a bit used to it before I tried to get out of bed. What really surprised me with the whole process was that it actually really wasn't as painful as I had expected that it was going to be. Now, obviously, when you have a hip replacement, it kind of puts in check pain, and your threshold definitely changes. Hopping out of bed was just the best thing ever, and I went and had a hot shower. That was just so nice. And what I actually did while I was in the shower is I sort of held onto the poles and stuff, and I just straightened up as much as possible. Like, I really just pushed my shoulders back and stopped hunching. And I found as I walked around, I kind of shuffled, like you don't really want to walk too fast. But I think that whole thing of getting in the shower, straightening up, you know, having a nice wash, getting in some new clothes, I just felt $1,000,000. I felt so much better. After probably, I want to say 2 days. They took the PCA off me and then they changed over to endone, and I think it was like Panadol, and there was Targin, and I think there was another one, Nurofen, ibuprofen, and they all did different things. So the endone was to obviously keep the pain in check. I think I was only on endone for another 1 or 2 days. Towards the very end, I was just on Panadol. Actually, no, that's the opposite way. Targin is the first thing they stopped. So I think a day or two after that, they stopped Targin, and that's like a slow release painkiller. When they stopped the Targin is definitely when I felt the most amount of pain, because I only had Panadol and ibuprofen. So I definitely noticed a bit of a, like the day they stopped it, I was like, oh wow, like I'm really feeling a bit of pain. And I remember having a bit of cry over it, but it was also because I think I was just like sleep deprived. I was sore, you know, I was in the hospital, and also the Panadol and ibuprofen hadn't actually been given to me in a while. So I was actually waiting, and I had been buzzing for maybe an hour, over an hour, and they still hadn't come in. And I had to actually walk out to the reception and say, like, while I was crying, I think the baby was crying, and I'm like, you guys need to give me my medication. Like, I need to take something. So that was probably the only really stressful time during the whole stay. I did stay in hospital for 5 days, 4 nights. Yeah, I think it was the 5th day we went home from hospital. Yeah, it was a very surreal moment putting him in the capsule to take him home. It was so exciting. I was so excited to get home. And I mean, I felt pretty good. By the time I had to actually discharge out of hospital, I felt really great. While I was in hospital, I definitely struggled with breastfeeding because Ryder had jaundice as well. All he wanted to do was sleep, and he just wouldn't feed. So that was a bit stressful. It did take me a while to actually get breastfeeding in check. I had all sorts of things going on with his jaundice. That took a little while for it to clear up. So he was struggling putting on weight. Then because I was kind of topping him up with formula, then my milk supply was reduced. I had to go on medication for that. He had a tongue and a lip tie that had to get cut. So there was just so much. It probably took, I want to say, between 6 and 8 weeks to actually establish breastfeeding properly. And now he is 14 weeks old. We've probably been breastfeeding exclusively since he was about 7 to 8 weeks old. That was actually probably the hardest thing that I had to deal with giving birth. So the recovery of the C-section was actually really amazing. I want to say I was only taking Panadol and ibuprofen from the 5 days after hospital for another maybe week and a half. So it was probably about 2 weeks in total from when I had him that I no longer needed any pain medication at all. And it was just Panadol and ibuprofen. The hardest thing with the recovery of C-section actually was sitting up from when you're laying down. That was definitely, you know, it was a bit painful, and that was really difficult and more frustrating than anything. So if I'd be lying down in the double bed with hubby and Ryder would start crying in the middle of the night, I would actually have to get hubby to push my back, and I'd sort of have to grab hold of something to pull myself up, or kind of use my hands to push myself up out of bed, and then getting hubby to kind of push my back just to give me that bit of support, because none of your tummy muscles work. And if you try to use them, oh man, that you would just like be like, oh yeah, felt that. That was really not good. I want to say that after, you know, after a week and a half, that pretty much subsided into really nothing. But by 2 weeks, I felt almost completely recovered. I felt really good. So my husband had 6 weeks off work. During that time, I couldn't actually drive. The obstetrician doesn't actually give you the clearance until after the 6 weeks, because insurance companies don't cover you if you're in an accident. So yeah, so hubby was at home looking after me. The recovery was definitely way quicker than I had expected. One of the really great things though about my husband taking 6 weeks off work was being able to sort of get into a bit of a swing of things. So understanding the baby and what he wants, the different cries, what to do, how to do things, you know. Like, it's the first time either of us had ever changed a nappy, that we had ever, you know, burped a baby or held a baby, you know, like a newborn baby. So it was all totally new to us. We definitely were winging it. So having that 6 weeks off together was a really great thing. And I'm definitely glad that we had it. It went really quick. Those first couple of nights where, you know, you sort of got the sleep deprivation, you also have the adrenaline from just having the baby. So you can kind of get through it. But I reckon after a week or two of just the repetitiveness of getting up every 3 hours overnight, nobody can really prepare you for that, and it's a whole other experience. And even now, Ryder's 14 weeks, he actually started sleeping through the night, I want to say when he was around 2 months old. So it's probably been 4 weeks or so now. So maybe 10 weeks. But yeah, it's been about a month now where every night he sleeps through and he really doesn't wake up. It's very rare that he does. He'll go to bed at anywhere between 7 and 9 p.m. and then he won't get up until any time from 4 to 6 a.m. So he'll have sort of like a 7 hour, 8, 9, 10, 11 hour sleep, which is just unbelievable. And every night I'm kind of dreading that will change, because I'm sure at some point it will. I don't think he'll be like that forever. Yeah, it's definitely something to get your head around and sort of just catch up with yourself. You sort of, as you're becoming a new mum, you're sort of trying to discover yourself. There's so much you're finding out about yourself and your partner. You're both trying to understand this tiny little being and look after them and trying to figure out what they need and what the right thing is. But yeah, it can be you know, very overwhelming at times, but what an amazing experience. You know, I totally understood in that moment of, you know, once we had him, you know, in our arms, and I remember just smelling him, like smelling his hair, and just sort of like, you know, leaning my face against his head and just sort of, you know, rubbing my face against his forehead and smelling him. And like, the smell of a newborn baby is something you will never ever forget once you smell it. It's just like this most amazing smell in the world. You feel love and you feel happiness, like goodness, and yeah, there's no way to explain it, but just the most precious feeling in the world. And yeah, we still think back to those moments and we can't believe that he's finally here, that, you know, he's a part of our life forever. And yeah, we're just sort of excited to see him grow and see how he changes and see who he looks like more. I definitely have more people, I think, say that he looks like me, but as he's getting older, I really see a lot of my husband in him. My husband's Chilean, so he has a very distinctive look. But yeah, I think it's in Ryder's eyes, to me, remind him of my husband. Yeah, so I mean, if I have missed anything, or if there's anything you guys want to know specifics about, definitely leave me a comment down below. I've tried to cover as much as I can. This will be a very long video, but yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed watching it and hearing about my story. So I feel really lucky that my whole experience was pretty amazing. The main reason behind that as well, I know I touched on it earlier in the video, but the main reason for doing a C-section was because my surgeon didn't want me to run the risk of dislocating my hip if I had a natural birth, because your legs get moved in all sorts of directions and, you know, they get reefed up near your chest and all sorts of stuff. He didn't want to run any type of risk, and he just said, look, I really strongly encourage you, you know, just to go C-section. You know, he's like, you've been through way too much to even just go down that route of, you know, needing a new hip replacement or something. So I was like, no worries. I kind of had always imagined that was going to happen anyway, so I really wasn't that worried, to be honest. I don't feel like I've missed out, if that's probably the best way to put it. There's definitely this huge debate or this huge discussion on, you know, people that have actually said to me that, you know, a C-section isn't giving birth, you know. But it totally is, you know. I felt like I gave birth to my son, you know. He didn't come out the el natural way, but I totally feel happy with how everything went, and I feel fulfilled as a mother, and I feel like a mother. I don't feel ripped off, you know, or anything like that. Yeah, I really hope I have covered everything. I'll try and cut this off right here, but thank you so much for letting me share this with you guys. I hope you enjoy all the photos and everything. Thanks again for watching and listening to my story, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye. And I love this photo. How cute is this? This was his little newborn shoot, and I think he was like, how old was he? 3 weeks? 4 weeks. I think he was like 4 weeks old there.